Welcome to the podcast, Phenomenosophy, Episode 9, Beyond the Veil. Today we will discuss ecstatic or mystical phenomena, such as psychedelic, religious, spiritual, and psychic experiences. We will explore the consciousness and awareness expansion that individuals have, how those experiences can benefit the individual or sense of meaning and our psyche in profound and healing ways, and the meaningful and positive impact such a phenomena may have on society experiencing a spiritual crisis by exploring the worlds of philosophy, science, psychology, spirituality, and esoteric doctrines. Mr. Gingy Thompson, how are you doing today, my friend?
Good, Miss. How are you?
I am well. Forgot to turn off my monitoring there. I was driving myself crazy on the intro because I was hearing my own voice through my headphones. So it was driving me a bit crazy there for a second.
Well and
So
crazy.
I'm driving me crazy. I can't, it's like I can't speak while I'm getting feedback of my own voice. So what do you think about this particular subject?
This is one of my favorite type of subjects. I love to look into things that don't necessarily have an agreed upon concrete answer. So beyond the veil is kind of like this aspect of consciousness that's outside of our regular floodlight awareness. So things that happen in the dream state, things that happen in near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, other types of not just like psychedelic, but also psychic, I'll say,
Mm-hmm.
type of experiences where you can move things with your mind, you can access information, you can bilocate. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there in this realm because it's literally limitless. Um, anyway, I just love to talk about this kind of stuff. I don't even know where to start with everything we've got lined out here. But
Well,
where you at?
that's kind of why I grouped all of these together because I do feel that they are all related. From the ecstatic or mystical experience to the psychedelic or the religious slash spiritual experience that people have, that that experience or that phenomena we have in those, or people have in those experiences of an expansion of consciousness and of mind, where typically people can experience being beyond the confines of their individual mind. It's almost like exploring the mind of the universe itself. And like I said, it's not limited to any one of these experiences. It kind of shows up in many different ways throughout many different cultures. I think an interesting, we could start with psychedelics because I feel that it's interesting that all cultures have in their past and in their traditions some type of shamanism that centered around psychedelic um, substances such as mushrooms and ergot and ayahuasca,
Ibogaine.
um, ibogaine. What's the peyote? So there are a lot of. And what's interesting is this is also related to. There was a connection made between many of these cultures between that and the religious experience. So it was seen as one and the same. And I'm wondering if you go far enough back into when humanity started exploring states of consciousness with psychedelics, if that's indeed where we kind of got religion from. That if maybe it was, I mean, it seems
Well, no, it
plausible to
reminds
me.
me of I think it was Terence McKenna's stoned ape philosophy.
Right.
Where the reason why people evolved so much faster than other animal life, like including apes and monkeys and stuff like that. Got your water pop?
Did you see it?
I
It's
did.
that new transparent aluminum.
That- That's awesome. Uh, Basically, his theory is that because humans started eating psychedelics, it expanded at least their mental capacity and faculties.
Mhm.
And so when you said that, I was like, oh, yeah, I mean, that is one major difference between people and the rest of the animal life on the planet is that we have theories and philosophies after life and before life and making sense of dreams and other things like that. That's religious.
Mhm. Yeah, but here's the thing. There are animals that often partake of psychedelic substances as well. Whether or not it has the same effect on
on,
them that it has on us,
on purpose.
uh, on purpose. like, um, I mean, one of the traditions we have around Christmas time, right? The Siberian roots of some of the symbology and traditions that we find in modern day Christmas traditions has shaman of Siberia carrying around sacks of mushrooms that they collect during the winter near the winter solstice, and also a tradition of drinking the pee of reindeer, because
Really?
supposedly that once the mushrooms have been processed by the body and come out in urine, that the psychedelic elements are much more accessible, much more intense. Now, I don't know if I'd go that far. That's a tough sell.
Do they
I
flavor it?
I don't know. Regardless, I'm not drinking reindeer pee. I'm not drinking my own pee. I mean, I've heard there's all kinds of great health benefits to it, but like I
There's a
said,
lot
it's
of people that do it.
it's a tough sell. It's a tough
Yeah.
sell. Um, I
Like I
uh,
would have to not be able to get it anywhere else and really need it in my day-to-day life. Or at
right.
least
Yeah, I've
it's
never
tough
needed.
sell.
Yeah, like I said, it might make you live forever, and I'm okay with not living forever. If I have to drink
Like
pee every morning,
live forever drinking my pee or live 100 years with no pee. Still a tough sell, man.
yeah, it's still a tough sell. So, with there are a lot of mystical and spiritual traditions that incorporate various types of psychedelics in their traditions. In fact, there's a book that was just written by Brian C. I'm going to murder his last name. Brian C. Murarescu. Murarescu. And he did all kinds of research, years of research on various traditions, various historical context of the imbibing of religious drink and edibles and things like that that may have or did have a psychedelic nature to them. And he found even in the times of Plato, which isn't that long ago, but they had this whole society, this sacred kind of society where they would, I want to say it was the Elysium was the place. I'm probably getting the wrong name there, but they found traces of various psychedelics and things like that in the leftover pottery and things, and not to mention some of the experiences recorded through history that could easily be connected to ergot, which is something that you get, I believe, when you have some kind of fermentation going wrong or going right in the making of alcohol, or maybe it's just when I can't remember if it was a wheat or a barley or some kind of a grass that humans use in making food, that when it was stored, that there was a tendency, depending on the conditions in which it was stored, that ergot, this type of, I want to say it's a type of bacteria or something, would grow on it. And if you ate it, you would trip. It had the chemical structure of ergot is very similar to LSD. So let's talk for a minute about the experience, because I think it goes beyond the psychedelic experience, because there are people who practice transcendental meditation and people who don't practice any kind of necessarily intentional way of tapping into a higher state of consciousness, who just one day have a kind of a, either like you were talking earlier about near death experiences, out of body experiences. And during these experiences, there's the same kind of phenomena where you have this outside of your own mind, outside of your limited consciousness, kind of a connection to a broader consciousness that you tap into. And I think it's interesting that they're now using psychedelics for treatment of like PTSD. And something they've reported with people who use psychedelics, that if someone who's like, let's say, close to dying or dying of some disease or something, that if they take a dose of, let's say, some mushrooms or something, all of a sudden the anxiety they have around death is kind of gone. And I could see that through my own experiences with psychedelics, in that there is this experience of there being a lot more to the world, to the universe, than meets the eye. And if you were caught up in a belief that the physical reality was the totality of reality, that there was nothing beyond what you could measure with scientific tools, that my experience is that is kind of left behind with a profound consciousness expanding experience, that it becomes clear in the experience. And depending on what you do, different psychedelics have different effects. But there's even, there's even the experience of meeting up with beings that are non-physical and seeing beings that are non-physical. And it's same with the near-death experience, where people will have an experience where they're meeting up with beings that don't have a physical presence in this world. And a lot of times these experiences, whether they start with or whether they're initiated through transcendental meditation, near-death experience, or a psychedelic experience, they have a profound effect on people, an individual's outlook. What has your experience been around consciousness expansion?
There's a couple of things that I wrote down while you were talking. I wonder where the anxiety of death comes from. The nervousness, the fear, especially. I know a lot of people are uncomfortable with what they don't understand. And what they
Right.
don't understand, it's easy to fear, it's easy to avoid. And something like this, especially seemingly so permanent, of someone's living in front of me and they die and they're just like, they don't wake up. And their body starts decomposing and coming apart, and they never like hang out with them in physical life anymore.
Right.
But I don't think it's the fear of like, oh no, my body's going to be disintegrating, because like I won't be around for that. It's not the, what happens, where do we go? I think all that anxiety comes from a belief that they'll be stuck in like a black box void of experience for the rest of their life. They won't be able to see anything. They won't be able to hear anything. They won't be able to feel anything. And Alan Watts spoke into that in one of his talks. He said it's improbable and almost completely certainly not going to happen to be locked in a black box like that for the rest of eternity, because that's not an experience. If you're not seeing, you're not feeling or hearing, there is no experience then to be, um, you know, stuck in
So
really for
so
the
is
rest of
so is that a fear of people being stuck with their own thoughts for eternity?
it. Maybe. I
May
mean, I
and
don't know
that
if
and
the
I and
thoughts
that
are there
may
too.
and that may be fearful for some people if depending on their thought process and how they think on a
Yeah.
regular basis, just being stuck with their thoughts, because there is definitely a a I don't want to say it's a personality type, because it ranges. It's not like there's only certain types of people, but what you see within our culture is that people strive for experience, right?
Go skydiving,
Yeah,
all kinds of others.
they go outside of themselves, or they're not, and some people do this in a way to feel okay, to feel at ease, like the compulsive shoppers, and I guess we could say the compulsive experiencers, right? Where it's like we need to be doing something, we need to be going somewhere, we need to be up to something, and that may be that uncomfortable experience of just being with one's thoughts.
Yeah,
And
or
something I
alone.
wanted to mention in that fear, because I think people who fear death, I think more often, rather than a fear of being in a blackness, because I believe that a lot of that fear has to do with the tying up of the body with the self, in that it's a fear of, for one, the pain and suffering that may come with getting to death, right? Because it's not everyone gets to go out like a light. So there, people have experienced an extreme amount of suffering. So I think there's an association with, well, I've already experienced, when I broke my leg, and when this happened and my appendix ruptured, and these were terribly painful and agonizing experiences. There was a lot of suffering involved. Well, death must be worse than that because you die. There's so
Right.
much
Or
suffering.
watching
But
their grandparents go through like chemo and cancers and other illnesses that
right,
end in death.
right.
Like I
And a
couldn't
lot of
imagine
times,
being in pain for months before I die, or years even.
right. And there's actually a lot of times, especially the elderly, when there's a condition that is plaguing them, some kind of chronic condition, oftentimes they actually, what ends up happening is they die of starvation and lack of water,
Mm.
because it's the disease isn't actually killing them. The fact that they can no longer eat food and drink a sufficient amount of water and do anything. So there's probably a fair amount of suffering that goes along with that, because you are still trapped with your thoughts. You are still conscious. So I think a lot of that fear has to do with tying up the self with the body. And when you have one of these ecstatic experiences, these self-transcendental experiences, you you get a glimpse of life without body, and so there's no longer a fear about
Exactly.
life without body, because you've
That was the
had,
point I wanted to get into, because
right.
if your mind opens up to like opens up to an experience without the body, and you're able to still think and function and interact and engage and evolve,
Mhm.
that's like, what am I stuck attached to the body for? So when
Right.
they come back into quote unquote waking consciousness, then it's like, oh, well, then what's next after this? I guess
Mhm.
it's not going to be a black box. I guess it's not going to be as bad as I thought. I guess it's not going to be painful. Because a lot of experiences that come back from this is like a sense of euphoria and coming home and acceptance and love and warmth and like all the good stuff, all the best
Right.
stuff.
Right. Right. And that's in most, I'm not going to say all, but most near death experiences, it's the same. It's a very similar
Yeah.
experience, where it's this,
And dreams.
yeah, and but it can go both ways in dreams and the near
Yep.
death experience, because
Yep.
I have, and I believe this person wrote a book. I don't know who the person was. I wasn't, as soon as I heard his take on his experience. I wasn't interested in his experience because I'm like, that probably has more to do with you than anything else. And the premise of the book was hell is real. I've been there. And so he had a near-death experience, and it was tremendously negative. And this speaks into the good trip versus the bad trip, right? Because and back to psychedelics for a moment here, because psychedelics aren't for everyone. And there are very many people who, when they try psychedelics, they have a very bad experience. They have a bad trip, right?
Dude,
and
even
so
people that smoke weed, they're like, I can't do that. It gives me anxiety.
right.
Like, even that mild amount of
Right.
consciousness influence
right.
can be very traumatizing for people.
Yeah, and there is a psychedelic element to marijuana. The THCV is a psychoactive substance, so it does have, like you said, a mild, especially if you compare it to like LSD or ayahuasca or something. It's definitely a much milder experience. However, what's going on for you internally is going to affect the way you handle that experience, right? And which is the same with the near-death experience. So I would equate that this guy who went to hell had the bad trip. And typically those who have bad trips are in a bad place, psychologically speaking. So I'd say they kind of go hand in hand in that.
It's also not like it's not absolute. You don't, because you got this hell, quote unquote hell, inside you, and you have a bad trip, doesn't mean every trip is going to be bad. Doesn't mean every time you smoke weed you're going to have anxiety. It's just
Right.
in those moments, wherever you are at, is what gets kind of placed under the magnifying lens.
Well, and
what
it
gets to be
depends.
examined.
It depends, because some individuals may always have that, whatever that is that you're talking about,
Always? Why?
because they don't deal with it. It's something it's something that they need to deal with that they don't deal with. And that's the interesting thing, is that the South American shaman of Peru, and there's actually many other cultures that refer to psychedelic substances as medicine. Okay, so ayahuasca is seen as a medicine, and the purging process and everything that occurs is this dealing with the demons that you may carry around with you from past experiences, past traumas, inner guilt, whatever it is. You're holding on to something you've done to someone else, that someone else has done to you, or some other traumatic or significant experience. But this is, I'd say, the importance of the guided experience, in that a shaman's not going to just give you some ayahuasca, go, okay, have a good time, let me know how it goes, right? He's there with you
in the corner going, man, he's having a hard time.
right.
Like they're actively
right.
participating
They're active.
in the whole
Exactly. It's an active participation where they're singing songs, they're playing instruments, but they're connecting to the people who are having the experience so that they can help them so that the medicine can take effect and they can help them through this psychological block that they have. And I think that's why they're having success treating PTSD with mushrooms. Now,
and addiction.
Yeah, and addiction. And iboga is supposedly amazing for addiction, but it has to do with how you handle yourself in that expanding consciousness, because in my experience, everything kind of comes up if you let it, and being able to look at everything and reconcile it, whether it means forgiving another, whether it means forgiving yourself, whether it means just letting go of some expectation of the future, because it all comes up. Fears of what might happen or will happen will come up. Depression or sadness or anger about the past will come up. And it's an opportunity in that state of consciousness where it's seemingly you have access to everything within your own consciousness. Things that you thought you'd forgot about a long time ago, you could pluck up and have complete clarity around it. Uh, and and you can see it in with new eyes and deal with it in a way that allows you to heal from it. So I don't know how I haven't really looked into these treatments that they're doing for people on PTSD with mushrooms, but I wonder if they're doing this in a guided kind of manner with maybe a psychologist or something along those lines, where it's like, okay, microdose and we're going to have a little talk, or if it's like, oh, hey, go do some mushrooms, have fun. I don't think it's like that. I imagine
I
if
don't
it's
think
going to
it's
be
like
effective in treating.
ibogaine. Yeah, I don't know that it would even be like ibogaine where they say, "Here's way too much. You're gonna sit there and go through your shit for 12 hours, and I'm
Dude,
gonna work you
hold
through
on,
it."
hold on. Let me tell you about ibogaine for a second, because I did ibogaine. 12
You did?
hours? Yeah, 12 hours would be nothing. I went for 5 days. Okay.
Jeez.
Now it wasn't an intense experience the entire 5 days, but I mean, it was intense for I don't even know, it's time and space kind of get kind of expand and contract. And so your sense of time, you kind of get lost in. But I know there several days passed. And I mean, into like, day 2, day 3, it was just still there. The presence of the effects of it were still there. And it wasn't like something like, mushrooms within 8 to 12 hours, pretty much all of it's gone. There's no lingering
Right.
effects. This had lingering effects for days. Now, it might
Mm.
be I did too much. I don't know. Because I got my hands on it and just was, kind of went for it. And considering myself a heavy head with my experiences with like ayahuasca and things like that, I was like, oh, well, I can handle so much of these other things that I could probably handle a lot of this. And so I probably went far and beyond the recommended dosage. However, it wasn't actually as insightful for me or as profound as experiences I've had with ayahuasca and mushrooms and things like that. I mean, it was just I don't know, even at its most intense, and this may be, again, I'm speaking about my personal experience. I don't know the kinds of experiences other people have on iboga. It is like you're elevated out of your body, but not like you're flying from planet to planet kind of elevation out of your body. You know what I mean? You're still here. You're still pretty grounded, and I guess that might be why it's so effective with addiction, in that the experience is lasting, and so you're kind of above your everyday consciousness, but not so far out that you can't, feed yourself and take care of yourself and, drink water. And, you still have enough of a mind in this world, but you have none of the physical, like, demands on your body or insecurities in your body or uneasiness in your body that usually comes with physical addiction, right? So like when you're physically addicted to something, there's an uneasiness within you that you feed with alcohol, nicotine, cocaine, whatever it is, heroin, right? You feed that uneasiness within you and then it goes away. Whereas that iboga, it's like that uneasiness is gone. And depending on the dose, it could be gone for a while. And so there's no need to feed that uneasiness within you. And perhaps it allows the body to break that physical addiction. So when you do come out of the experience, the physical addiction is gone because your body kind of went through letting go of the physical dependency, right?
I do remember even fasting did that for me. Like if I ever wanted to quit smoking cigarettes, I forget when I was doing this, maybe like 5 or 8 years ago. Actually, the first time I quit smoking cigarettes was for 3 years. And the only way I did it was I did the master cleanse.
Right.
And I did it for 2 weeks straight, 14 days. I didn't have a single craving during that entire time. And I've done that same thing with the water fast and juice fasts and raw diets and stuff like that, where like my body goes into like preservation mode. And so it's like only what's necessary. And those things are obviously not necessary. Cigarettes are not necessary to live and to thrive. And so it was as if it just kind of put it on the side. But as soon as I started eating again, As soon as I started, my normal life routines again, then all of a sudden the addiction would come back up, but it wouldn't be nearly as strong because I had been off it for 2 weeks
Right.
and probably clearing out a lot of the nicotine in my blood. So I
Right.
couldn't imagine in this if it just cuts it out.
Well, here's the
Go
thing.
ahead. Go ahead.
Uh, nicotine will calm an uneasiness within your body, correct?
Yeah, that was my experience.
Okay. So if you start eating foods that create an uneasiness within your body, like if you eat a lot of sugars, a lot of carbohydrates that create that kind of uneasiness within the body, your mental tendency, even though you may not no longer have a physical addiction to nicotine, you know that coping with that uneasiness within the body, and again, this isn't necessarily something that happens on a conscious level, but coping with that uneasiness, that physical uneasiness, for someone who's used nicotine for years to do that would be reaching for a cigarette. Or someone who's used alcohol to do that, it'd be a very easy way to go back and grab alcohol because once the alcohol's taken effect, that uneasiness goes away. I've noticed that with diet, that
Interesting. Yeah.
that like because I eat a really high fat, high protein diet, and I eat very low carbs. And I noticed that, but I love carbs. I mean, come on, donuts, like they're my favorite. So every once in a
Donuts.
while, I go big and I go and I'll get some donuts or I'll get some apple pie, Dutch apple pie, or something like that. And that uneasiness comes into my body, and I'm just like, oh man, like it's worth it. Like, there's no way I'm giving up. There's no way I'm giving up donuts and apple pie or nothing. I know beforehand I will be experiencing that physical uneasiness within my body because of the sugars and everything and how they're affecting me in that moment. It's not lasting, but I can see how
The food
that,
coma.
yeah, the food coma is definitely a thing too. I notice when I eat, high fat, high protein diet, I can eat and still function fairly well. But if I sit down and eat, and I do this, I do this. This isn't an exaggeration. I will eat half of a Dutch apple pie, and I'm not talking about some little packaged pie you get. I'm talking about an entire pie. I can eat half of a pie. Actually, I can eat an entire pie, and I have eaten an entire pie. I try not to make it a regular practice, but it's totally doable, totally possible. I can eat an entire pie. I can eat an entire pizza. I can eat an entire dozen donuts. I don't do it often. and I
I've
know
seen you
that
do it.
I know the physical effects it has on me. And I know when I'm doing it that I'm going to regret it physically. But that it just tastes so good at the time. So so for me, that's the moderation in that I only do it once in a rare while as opposed to eating like that all the time. So it's a way of dealing with that uneasiness. So the iboga kind of takes you into that state of not experiencing any kind of dis-ease within the body. For me, it was for days, whereas I had that same experience on, mushrooms, ayahuasca stuff, where it's like that tension in the body is gone. That anything that any uncomfortability physically and even mentally for me is just gone. But with like ayahuasca and mushrooms and things like that, it's for, hours,
Hours.
not days, So,
I had that experience the last time I did mushrooms, where I get these headaches, and I've been like on this path of figuring out where they come from. And I thought it was smoking, so I thought it was drinking, I thought it was fasting, I thought it was all these things. Um, but what I found is I started to feel this migraine come on right as I had planned to like spend the afternoon eating some mushrooms. And I ate them. I was like, "Oh my god, please don't let me have a headache while I'm I'm on this trip." And as soon as I felt it come on, I could literally feel muscle by muscle letting go and
mm,
relaxing and going into that state. And by the time like the mushrooms fully kicked in, all the tension was completely released in my body. And I had no uneasiness at all.
Right.
I could do anything I thought that would normally like agitate or make the headache worse, no
Mm.
problems. And so I started noticing in my own life where I hold tension throughout the day and where I can intentionally relax and let go. And I tell you, it's like literally gotten rid of headaches because of
Mhm.
the even just standing. I notice that I'll be like extended like this. I'm like, I don't have to do that. I can relax and sit down and oh, I'm sitting like this. I wonder what happens if I just straighten my neck out and oh, I'm tense over here and I let it go. It's been amazing, dude. Like
Right.
the amount of tension an individual holds. And obviously it was a lot worse when I was smoking cigarettes
Mhm.
because the uneasiness would come on and it would just go on to the pile of tension that I would hold in my body and
Right.
make it all worse. So like while it wasn't directly smoking that was giving me headaches, it was absolutely contributing to it.
Right.
Not the smoking, but the not smoking.
Right.
The uneasiness that came in between the smoking sessions.
Right.
So it's a the whole body, man, and the mind just
Mhm.
holding tension like that. These things can really open up a space that psychologically you can go into that your whole body follows and will relax. It's I think that's really what gets into the the PTSD and the addiction recovery and all of that stuff that gets worked out is you get to a place where you can deal with things one on one,
Mhm.
not with the mound of shit on your shoulders.
Right. So tell
Yeah.
me about your relationship with spirit, because I want to give you an opportunity to kind of bring in some of the experiences you've had, like through the Monroe Institute and things like that. Give me a short kind of overview of your of Gingy's spirituality and its connection to these types of experiences.
um
And I mean all the types, from the psychic experiences that you've had, mystical experiences, religious or spiritual experiences, and your philosophy on spirituality, or the nature of life in the universe, and
so
purpose and
I,
meaning.
I feel like there's a couple of points that I could make that would really help it I guess click and make sense for people. And one of the not one of the first things, but maybe on day 2 or 3 of the first Monroe Institute workshop called the Gateway Voyage, that's their prerequisite course for all the other cool stuff like spoon bending and stuff. Um, one of the first things that we do on one of those later on days is they showed us um, this YouTube video that was I forget the lady's name, Jane. I don't remember. I'm going to butcher it if I try to guess it. Anyway, she had something like an aneurysm or something in her brain,
Right.
where when it erupted or whatever was happening, it shut off the left side of her brain. And when her left side of her brain went down, she lost all linear egoic thought, and all that she was left with was this like euphoric, we are all one. She couldn't tell the difference between the atoms of her hand and the atoms of the wall, and just this floating in this like space. And then her left brain kicks back on. And she goes, "Oh my god, I'm having a stroke or something." So she was like running to the phone to grab the phone and dial 911, and she grabs and goes, "Phew, numbers, we're all one," and she's back into this ecstasy space. And so what they talk about is the difference between left brain and right brain, which I think is not entirely accurate, but it's easy for people that even people that don't fully believe in mystic stuff to
Mhm.
be able to, like every scientist believes that there are two hemispheres of a brain. And the tech that they use is called hemisync, which is short for hemispheric synchronization. So
Synchronization.
it's meant
Yeah.
is to have the whole mind operating as one unit as opposed to like two different halves. So they draw this distinction between left brain and left brain being all linear, separated, egoic type of thought, and right brain being this subconscious type of activity, some subconscious type of awareness, where they say that's the aspect of the brain that beats your heart and operates your glands and stuff like that. And the left brain is what, books your calendar events and drives you down the road and makes sure you're on time and writes a grocery list and all of those things. And so their whole goal is to not, which is traditionally kind of the goal of some meditations like transcendental meditation, is to shut off the left brain and get rid of it, ego, right? Is the Monroe Institute has a different approach where they just want to have the left brain in the passenger seat rather than the driver's seat, and almost just watch instead of identifying and explaining and driving the car. So, in that sense, I think everybody can kind of get an idea as to what this other side of experience is, the side of you that's growing your hair and, you know, I don't know, all that stuff.
beating
The
beating
glands
your
and everything,
heart, beating your heart,
eating your heart,
filtering your
but
blood.
also the aspect of you that you dream with. It's usually not egoic left brain type of actions. It's, oh, how did I get here? And then your brain's trying to figure out what's going on and who you're dealing with and what's, where to go next. It's in the passenger seat. It's observing. It's not driving. And then the side of you that has all these other abilities to go out of body, to bend spoons, to have an like a near death experience, or to when you get on mushrooms and all these other things, it's a way for your left brain to take a step back. It almost inhibits it from driving, or at least it evens the playing field out. So looking at it in that way, I think is extremely rational. And again, it's not the entire story, um, but it's a good starting point to kind of understand where all of these connect. Now, there's this other guy that I've been studying his work lately, and everyone calls him Rupa, R-U-P-A, but I don't remember how to say his entire name. From from New Zealand. Anyway, he makes a pretty interesting point with psychedelics being the exact same type of state, like consciousness state that one can get into, but that people are rarely productive with.
Right.
Like getting into an accidental out of body experience and being like, what's happening? You eat some mushrooms and you're like, oh, I'm just going to chill here and feel all the warmth and the fuzzies and enjoy the show. Like no one's getting into those states to be productive. And what he claims is that you can be incredibly productive there.
Mm.
And so some
Well,
of the
that's
people that are
probably
using ibogaine productively are doing that, but it's generally like a party.
microdosing. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think that's why that whole microdosing practice has become so prevalent in society and our culture today, is that you can be extraordinarily functional and productive with a certain dosage. Once you go beyond a certain dosage, you're kind of done for the day. Don't plan on
unless
getting
you
anything more.
learn how to unless you learn how to navigate in those spaces, which is what he was talking about.
Right.
To take a normal, like hallucinogenic, like you're done for the day type of dose and being productive there. Because yeah,
Well,
you're not going to be
okay,
able to be like,
define.
I'm going to
Okay,
function
but yeah, but define productive. Like if productive,
doing
if your
something with
job,
it.
let's say if your job is to interact with people and to explain, let's say, some technical details to them, I don't think you're going to be very functional or productive. Because in my experience, like if I take a heavy dose of mushrooms, right, my mind is moving at a rate that my mouth could never keep up with. So all of a sudden, like nothing comes out of my mouth making sense, especially if you're peaking or something where it's just like, yeah, no, I don't even want to talk right now. I'm just going to let this experience happen. And I'm not going to try to vocalize or explain it or articulate it in any way. Because I've watched it. I've watched people try to articulate their experiences when they're peaking on mushrooms, and it's hilarious. because it doesn't, you can't articulate it. And you're like, you had the thought to articulate it, and it was a good idea at the time, and you started articulating it, and now you are somewhere completely different. You no longer even have any interest in this articulating the experience, idea you had.
And all that comes out is the schnozberries taste like schnozberries. And
And
you
you
thought
think
it was profound.
the most profound thing you've ever said.
Yeah. So like being productive doesn't necessarily mean going to work.
Right.
Or
And that's what I wanted to
engaging with
make the
other.
distinction. I wanted to make
Yeah.
that distinction because, yes, I think that there's probably, from the standpoint of being human, there may be nothing more productive than for people to drop a dose of some psychedelic, just by the state of consciousness that you get to enter and explore, and how you're able to bring up and deal with past traumas and things like that. I think it's profoundly effective and beneficial for human beings.
Yeah. So for example, in the therapeutic use of ibogaine, like you were talking about, to be productive with it could be to face what's going on psychologically within yourself, to heal any type of issue with addiction, to heal any traumas that you may still be holding on to, or anything you need to forgive. Those are things that you can productively approach in those states. Now there's like, okay, here's a really good example. I, at the Monroe Institute, in my in the Gateway Voyage, the first course that I did, I had an experience where I accidentally ended up in this like all-knowing state. I could actually predict and tell people before it happened who was going to speak, what they were going to say, and in what order. And it was overwhelming. I knew my role in growing grass, in holding atoms together, in shining the sun, in spinning planets and orbits. I understood, as if it was like, oh yeah, I know that time's going to keep flowing. I know that in 5 minutes from now, I'm going to, still be sitting here having this phone call. It was that much of a certainty. I could see it, I could expect it, and it's just like I didn't have to try to guess or understand or know or anything. It was just, I could feel it as if it was an extension of myself.
Mhm.
Now, in that state, I was just like, oh my God, what's happening? I can't believe I know all these things and this is overwhelming. And I was just trying to like put the lid back on, basically. And had I even been present enough to question, like, I wonder what I can do in this state? I wonder what happens if I look at tomorrow or the next year, or like, what stocks should I invest in? Like, none of those things came to mind for me. It was just this like, whoa, blissful. I know everything that's happening, and I'm in just this state of gratitude. And like, if I had approached it with a desire to be productive or even curious, like I'd have had conversations with plants and animals. I would have, I don't know. I don't know what I would have done. And that's the point. When I heard this guy talking about going into these states with an intent to be productive or at least curious, it just kind of opened the door for me, being like, this is something that people usually go to for vacation, not for any actual purpose.
Yeah,
What do
we
you think
could
about
call it. We could call that lucid tripping.
I love
Right?
it. Lucid trip.
Like lucid dreaming, lucid tripping is being intentional, right? You're going to put yourself in that state or have that experience. And the experience you're specifically talking about had nothing to do with psychedelics. That's what's interesting.
Right.
No.
But I've actually gone into like mushrooms and intentionally went in to like learn something and had incredible results. Like, I'm going to listen to this guided meditation while I'm doing this, or I'm going to investigate, this experience or this pattern or something in my life. And I've had those doors just open up as if they weren't locked, and they were
Right.
there for me to investigate. Sorry, I got a fruit fly. It's like craving the moisture in my eyes or something. I'll just keep waving at you.
Okay, that's fine. So what is having had these experiences, because you've had these experiences, you've had them with the aid of sacrament or psychedelics, you've had them without, you in transcendental type of activities and meditations, and you've had them outside of any intention of having them just kind of falling on you. So what is your, having had all these different experiences at all these different points in the consciousness that you experience during as a part of this phenomena, what is your spiritual outlook? How do you see the spiritual nature, or what do you see as the spiritual nature of the universe, of the totality?
I've not really put together a concrete thought or formation of thought for this,
Mm-hmm.
but fundamentally, I think it's the duality, the physical and the non-physical, which are really two sides of the same thing. And understanding that you have conscious and unconscious, but they're both still your mind, is to me the foundational aspect of what I believe spiritually. So if I'm consciously, physically with my brain thinking like, this is what, the patterns I'm in, or these are the beliefs that I hold, or whatever, and then I'm unconsciously embodying them and reacting and constructing my life accordingly, they're just different ways that I function. And in my experience, almost every single person on the planet has grown that left side, physical side, egoic side, to the point where they're not even aware that they have a subconscious. Now, logically, they'll be like, of course I have a subconscious. Like, that's why I breathe when I stop trying to breathe. That's why my heart beats. That's why my hair grows and my blood pumps and all these things. But that's where it ends. Like, even in medical science, there's no understanding or no intentional like labeling and pointing fingers to the mechanisms that operate the body in that. And it really, to me, it's not subconscious, it's like the super conscious. Like, our egoic awareness and focused consciousness exists within this broader spectrum. So it's like the yin and the yang concept, where there's a little bit of yin inside the yang, there's a bit of yang inside the yin. It's like the focused awareness is that dot inside of the bigger aspect of it.
Okay,
And it's
I feel,
vice versa.
yeah, I feel like you're giving me a clinical explanation of your spirituality.
Okay, it's just fundamental, basically.
Yeah, well,
they both exist.
Don't
we're
try
all
to
lopsided.
Don't try to explain it to me in a scientific way. What
do you want?
From the experiences you've had, what is your take on the nature of you as a being and the nature of the universe? What's going to happen when you die, Gingy?
I would say, you want to know about afterlife?
And no, I want to know about life, the totality of it. I want to know about.
So that's the point
essence.
that I'm getting.
I feel like you were getting into this clinical explanation of, I guess, of spirituality, which I believe could be left outside the conversation for now. Not that there's not a use for that conversation, but it's kind of the mental masturbation that I see happening in science and philosophy, and let's let go of trying to put it into any school of thought for a moment, and just why do you live your life by the principles you live your life by? What are the principles you live your life by? Like, that's an important question, and it speaks to a spiritual aspect of you, because I know you're not a religious person. So not a lot of, let's say you were religious, or some people, typically people who are religious, they live their lives by their moral code, by their principles, because there's this horrible consequence if they don't, right? And and I feel like that there's a much higher level of approaching principles and morals and ethics and virtues as a from a place rather than, oh, well, there's consequences if I don't. Well, then it takes a more sophisticated approach to spirituality to live your life intentionally from a set of principles and virtues. So I want to understand your sophisticated understanding of your spiritual nature that has you choose to live your life from certain principles, morals, why you embody certain virtues.
Okay. So fundamentally, it's because nothing is truly separate. To be cruel to somebody else is to be cruel to myself. And man, I'm fighting so hard not to go scientific because I want to explain how duality leans back up
Yeah,
to
no.
like the oneness of shit.
We'll
So
save that for another show.
okay. So
Imagine trying to have this conversation on mushrooms.
that wouldn't happen. I mean, it would over hours and hours and hours.
Right.
So, I am going to throw a little bit of this in here because the fundamental structure that I see is that at my individual consciousness awareness, I have physical and non-physical. And as those break down and you notice they're left and rights of the same oneness, two sides of the same coin, then once you move beyond my individual consciousness and yours are two different sides to the same coin. And eventually you keep leading back to all these polarities to this oneness where there is no differentiation at a certain level of consciousness between me and this cup or you or the microphone and the electricity. It's all aspects of the same one thing. So for me, understanding the nature of that, it doesn't make sense to steal or to kill or to lie or any of those other things that we would say like would be on the list of commandments or that would be looked down upon socially. I do things that I feel are effective and productive and like common sense, understanding the true nature of what is. That if everything is all different aspects of the same thing, it'd be like having one arm fighting against the other arm. Everybody suffers. And since I don't want to see suffering in the world, because I don't want to see victimness in the world, because I don't want to see anger or violence or any of those things, I choose not to participate. And I choose to participate in the things that I do want to see, which could be love and connection and support and compassion. Those things to me are important. And I've actually had several conversations like this with my girlfriend. She's, we'll talk about like Donald Trump. There's a lot of people in this country, especially like minorities, that freaking hate that guy. And they'll look at me and they're like, what do you think about him? And I'm like, he is what he is. It is what it is. Are you going to vote for him? No, because that's not something I choose to give my energy to and to perpetuate and to contribute to in the world. Like, and that's not just him. I've got bigger views on bigger systems, like the entire political system isn't something I feel I would want to give all my energy into, or at least be committed to being as educated as some people are, or as engaged as some people are. And so it's not necessarily like I'm for this and I'm against this. It's a spectrum for me of how much of myself do I want to contribute to what I see and experience in the world. And so that's my basic metric for the morals that I hold, the ethics, my thought processes. I don't base it on any actual religion. And I would say that whatever God is would be that state of oneness that is undifferentiated consciousness, where there is no difference between me and God. There's just us, the relationship. There's just, the bigger picture. Does that make sense?
Somewhat.
Wasn't expecting to go that deep today in this, but cool.
Well, and there was a reason I wanted you to, was because in relation to these experiences, right? These ecstatic, these transcendental experiences, regardless of where they come from, whether they come from the psychedelics or meditation or anything else. what I really want to get at is how have these types of experiences affected, like, let's say, your purpose in life, the meaning you give life, and the principles and morals, ethics, virtues that you choose to embody. How have those experiences, these expanded consciousness experiences, affected that? Because what I'm looking at is, right now I look out at the world and I'm seeing, in my assessment, what I would consider a spiritual crisis, in that there is a letting go of what I would consider fundamental principles for a functioning society, fundamental morals, fundamental ethics, that if you don't embrace them and if you don't choose to embody them, that you have a breakdown in societies and cultures and families and everything else. And I see, and again, my assessment is that there's a tremendous amount of letting go of foregoing all of these, what I feel are principles that, from my standpoint, and probably from yours as well, that's like, well, of course you embody that principle of forgiveness. That's not an of course for most people.
Yeah.
And of course, compassion is a place I sit in. And of course, authenticity and honesty are important. So what I'm getting at is that in having these expanded consciousness experiences, whether they're spiritual, mystical, religious, transcendental, is that something that you feel has contributed to your, I want to say, your
Spirituality,
certainty in these principles, in these morals, in these ethics, or a stronger connection to them?
They definitely have, especially the work at the Monroe Institute and other like psychic development or meditation even type of work, because they've led me to the understanding that I have today. Like without the experience of knowing all that is, I wouldn't really. I'd still be guessing. Without the experience of like feeling through somebody else or
Right.
thinking somebody else's thoughts, or the blending of people, then I wouldn't really have an experience of the separation isn't as concrete as we may imagine. And that's led me to understanding more different, like more better different different type of scientific models, like sympathetic vibratory physics, that explain the nature of these phenomena. Without those experiences, I would have never pursued the reasoning that made it make sense, or the models that can account for them. Like perfect example, the placebo effect. Science still isn't really like, oh, well, check it out. We can leverage this and make the placebo effect operate even better, and we can get these different results and stuff. It's just like, oh, well, that's just an aspect of error that we have to account for. That placebo effect is going to account for this much, and it's like that's a very real. Like, what was it? The study of like men who took it to regrow hair, and like the placebo effect, like 20% of them regrew a full head of hair. They're like, oops, there's sugar pills, but like that can be used, that can be leveraged, that's powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And the placebo effect, I think, is a great example in that it has everything to do with the individual's intention and expectation, and really like their openness, their open-mindedness.
Mhm.
Because if someone who you consider to have no credibility hands you the sugar pill, it'll probably have a lot less effect. Like that would be a great experiment. Have right?
Right.
Have Dr. Fauci walk in with a sugar pill and have Donald Trump walk in with a sugar pill, and the subject, the patient, is a diehard Democrat, right? And have them say the same thing. This will cure you of this disease. This is a magic cure for this disease, right? Chances are you take it from this person that you give no credibility to, that you have no sense of authority in their opinion, it'll have probably little to no effect. But if you hold someone up on a pedestal, like, wow, you know, the Dalai Lama just gave me this medallion and it's gonna, make me wealthy and loving and
Cure my
whatever,
heart
right?
disease.
Exactly. And because you hold the Dalai Lama as this great and wonderful being, and so his words and his actions, you have all the merit and authority you could ever give them. And so it's really the person themselves, that the individual who's receiving and who holds that person in such high esteem, and then therefore holds the trinket or sugar pill or whatever in such high esteem, that it has the effect that it has,
I would even say
right?
that it's the belief in it that it has that effect. And the more credible the source, the higher level of belief. Like this is what
Right.
happens. I forget who it was, but there was somebody who actually went through and studied the spontaneous healings that happen at church. They're
Right.
going through all the dances, and the guy who's like taking his coat and hitting people across the face, like, and you're cured, and oh, you can walk again, hitting people in the faces and stuff, and them actually being able to get up and then
Right.
walk afterwards. And
Right.
it's like, what the hell is happening? This person hasn't walked in 20 years since this car accident. And all of a sudden, he gets slapped across the face by this priest guy, and now he's walking.
Right.
It's like this die-hard to your core belief that like this high figure of God exists and that all of the energy and the magic in the world effectively does work and miracles do happen, and this guy is going to bestow this upon me.
Mhm.
Without all of those dominoes lined up, getting hit across the face isn't going to do jack. In
Right.
fact, if you were asleep and he hit you across the face, you woke up like, what the hell? Nothing would happen. But
Right.
because you're there and you're dancing and you got everything moving inside your body and your mind, your whole consciousness, all of a sudden, this is now an impactful situation that can literally heal decades of trauma.
Right. Yeah, and that if you're sitting in the audience, you're like, man, this guy is a quack. Guarantee you, the slap to the face with the jacket ain't gonna do nothing.
Or you're like, I got to get my mom in here. She hasn't walked in 30 years.
Now that's
But it's this.
interesting. That's actually an interesting little segue to a part that I wasn't even sure we would bring up in this conversation, but I do feel it's significant, is ritual, right? So
Right.
all religions have ritual, and where did ritual come from? Why does it have ritual, and what's the importance, and what's the significance, and what's the power that we give it? And I think you spoke right into that with the belief of it. And there is definitely a channeling, an energetic channeling that's occurring, right? So, walking around doing certain things, incense and burning something and whatever it is. So there's all different ideologies have all their different rituals, but it creates a meaningful connection between the participant and, you could call it their higher selves, the God, the uh, the oneness of all, whatever it is. There's these practices, like if I look at the ritual, like something I'm familiar with. My family's Catholic, so they have a Catholic ritual in the Catholic Church, and there's this cool little part of the ritual where you kind of give blessings to all the people around you, right? And that is, I think, that is such a fundamentally powerful practice within a society or culture to, like, regardless of who's near you, because it's not like you necessarily know any of the people around you, but to, you know, for a moment, drop into a place of vulnerability and authenticity and compassion and love, and to, like, share this with people, right? To, like, you know, to give your blessings to them, and to wish them well, and to look them in the eyes, and to, shake their hand or hug them or whatever it is. This is a profoundly powerful practice, especially in creating some kind of cohesion or a social fabric. And again, so this is one of the things that I feel like I wanted to bring this conversation around to, was that what I'm calling a spiritual crisis, right? And it's interesting because now we're living out this social distancing reality where no, you can't touch people. You can't get within 6 feet of people. And you can't show them your face, and you can't let them see your face. And so I feel that there's something tremendously damaging to the social fabric of our society if we can't touch each other, we can't get near each other, and we can't see each other's faces, right?
For sure.
And not that this is a new phenomenon. Well, I mean, yeah, the social distancing and masking, that's a new phenomenon, but it's something that's already been, it's been showing up in society, this disconnect between us, between individuals and things like that, where because their religion isn't necessarily a big part of our culture and society anymore. Now, there's a good percentage of people who still do attend rituals and religious services and have a belief and attempt to live their life by a certain set of principles and morals and ethics and things like that. I would say a majority of people are not. Even people who may call themselves like, yeah, I'm a Christian or I'm a whatever, they aren't necessarily living their lives by these principles, and they aren't necessarily going through the types of ritual or process that brings people together, that has people forgive each other and bless each other and love each other. So these are no longer practices that a large percentage of the population is participating in. And not that I'm not saying that religion is a solution to the spiritual crisis. So I'm not saying that this is a crisis of religion. I don't think that it's necessarily religion that people need, but it is definitely a connection to the spiritual nature of life, to spirit, to those higher virtues and principles.
Religion is an access point to that.
It is. Sure. It absolutely is. But I mean, because of the dogmatic aspects of it, people are throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? It's like, well, yeah, there's no way the world is 6,000 years old, therefore this is all bullshit. Like, as opposed to looking at it as, like, from the standpoint of, well, like, what's the value in the religion? As opposed to, like, yeah, there may be some factual elements that aren't exactly on par, that we can scientifically prove aren't so, but there's something that speaks to social cohesion, social fabric, to something that benefits people living in a society. Again, I'm not saying we need to adopt one religion or another. In fact, I think that's the problem, is because now it's become war of religions, where it's like, well, there's now my religion's right and your religion's wrong. So you have, Islam and Christianity at odds with each other, because one group believes they're right and the other group believes they're right, and both groups believe that the other is wrong. And I feel that if people can have an experience, whether it be through transcendental meditation or prayer, or just accidentally, because I know the ecstatic experience or the mystical experience can just occur for a person in a moment of awareness and realization. But I feel that by having those experiences, it allows people to be open to and see the importance of living your life by a certain set of principles, by a certain set of morals and ethics, and why these are important, not only for you as an individual, but they're important for your family. They're important for your your town, your community, for your society at large. You know, it's something that I, again, this is my assessment, and I make this assessment based on what I'm seeing, not only in the streets but in the media. Is there's this, you know, like the fact that they're, you know, I've heard psychologists speaking on TED Talks, and really what they're leaning into is the normalization of pedophilia. You know, like, oh, they're not doing anything wrong. They just, you know, they identify as a younger person, and you know,
As a clover gender.
yeah, and it's like, so this, the whole morals and ethics is kind of just being thrown out, but, and not, again, not by everyone, not by all parts of society, but you see it, you know, in that movie, Cuties, that was on Netflix. It was like sexualizing 11-year-old girls.
Oh, I
Yeah,
heard about something like that.
yeah,
There's being canceled, right?
yeah, yeah. I don't know if it's been canceled. There
No,
was a
on Twitter.
oh
It's being canceled on Twitter.
oh, has it really?
No, I mean,
Interesting.
okay, so I'm talking about like the cancel, quote unquote, cancel culture.
Oh, cancel culture as something separate.
Right. So like everyone on Twitter is like, F this, cancel cuties, hashtag cancel cuties. We don't want to be sexualizing 9-year-old girls or whatever else. Like we're normalizing pedophilia in this. And that is the rationale of the give.
Right,
And everybody wants it pulled. I'm sure
right.
Netflix is loving the publicity, but
Yeah. Well, not everyone. There were a lot of people defending it. There were a lot of people
mm,
defending it, and that's where I'm saying that there's a spiritual crisis. That's what.
is it
That's
like
where
a
why. That's how I ground my assessment in there being a spiritual crisis. Is when you have thousands of people standing up to defend the sexualization of little girls. You know, uh, there's a problem there. There's a problem there. And again, that's not the only evidence I have for backing my assessment. But what I wanted to get at in this conversation was, for one, I wanted to explore the nature of these experiences and what they're like and what we can gain from them, but also how experiences like this may be medicinal, healing in a way that can uh, bring people back to a place of embracing, you know, principles and morals and ethics and virtues that would have us as individuals and as a society thrive.
so
Kind of where I'm going to go
one
with
of
it.
the I want to add this on top of what you said is that fundamentally everybody has an aspect of their awareness, which will be conscious or unconscious. Everybody has an aspect of their awareness that recognizes the oneness that all of this comes from. And without putting a title to it, that is a shared experience between not only people, but everything else. And if we're talking logically, where the dissonance is being created, like I was just talking about that lady on YouTube talking about having her left brain shut down. And when it did shut down, she could see the oneness. She couldn't tell the difference between anything, herself or anything outside of herself. If the dissonance is coming from logic, left brain, ego, which is, I use ego differently, so just kind of take that with a grain of salt. I use ego to explain like the entire left brain, you know, conscious focus, floodlight, whatever, not floodlight, but the spotlight. Anyway, if we're talking about that, we can literally prove that there is no differentiation between things by almost any
Well,
direction or
I
any
mean,
path or any modality that we get into.
I
If you
feel
go
like
down,
I feel like this is a woo-woo point of conversation that loses people. And we're all one, man. And like even quantum
right,
science is, I mean, yeah, if you look at quantum physics, you could say, yep, there's no separation from one thing to another. That.
But even if you go into sports, like talk to Michael Jordan, I'm sure he's had experiences of the entire team operating as one unit where they didn't have to think where people were or what they were doing.
No,
It was just
I've had that experience on a high school team, so I know professional
Yeah.
sports teams have had that experience.
So I'm saying, no, even like for me as a musician, that's something that happens in bands. That's something that happens in sports. That's something that happens in science. Like no matter what modality you go down, you can get to a similar type of experience or understanding. So really the point I'm getting to is that people are choosing not to go far enough to reach that realization. They're
Yeah, but
choosing to stay in this space of
here's the
individuality.
thing. Can you? Because it's not universal. You can ask Michael Jordan, he could say like, yeah, it was like we were all one unit. But you ask another guy who was on the court with him at the same game, he's like, yeah, I don't know what the hell he's talking about. I didn't experience that. You know what I mean? So there is a, I don't want to say there's a set type of consciousness, but there is a place where you get to consciously that you can kind of feel, have that experience, that phenomenon becomes real for you. And it's not necessarily that a person that is near you or around you during this experience is going to have the same experience. Now, I have had that where, and again, this was one of those experiences that involved no psychedelics or anything. And it was me and another person, and we both kind of dropped out of physical reality for a moment. We were surrounded, and we both had the same experiences. This was so phenomenal about it. And that was such a profound experience in knowing ourselves as bigger than what we think we are, knowing ourselves as more significant or more substantial than the physicalness, than the physical body, that our consciousness is where so much of our power lies, and where so much of our substance of being lives or lives about, because it is more profound than any physical experience you can have, right? And once you've had more and more of these experiences, it starts to connect you to that more substantial side of life, or that more substantial side of yourself, whereby those principles and virtues and things do appear to be much more important because of the connection that you experience between everything, because of
I see what you mean.
the substance of your true nature, right? If all we were these meat machines that walk around stuffing shit in one end, shitting it out the other end, and reproducing, like, that's not that great a thing. Why must it go on? Things must go in one end of the tube, must come out the other end of the tube, and we must make more tubes, right? Like, there's no significance to life at all. If you really see yourself that way, and if you really see the nature of human beings that way, then why do we care if we destroy the entire planet? All the tubes that are shoving shit in one end and shitting it out the other end will continue to take shit in one end and shit it out the other end, like, because that's extremely important, right? For us to eat and shit and sleep and reproduce. That's so important. No, it's not. If all you see is the physical side of life, and all you see is this physical being, and all we are these meat machines, then there, you can see how very quickly that becomes like, why have any morals? Why have any ethics? Right? It's dog eat dog world. I want to make sure my tube gets nice and fat, right? Like, no tube means anything, is no more important than any other tube, right? Because they're all doing the same thing, shoving shit in one end, shitting it out the other, and reproducing. And that's not that great a thing. Like that's not some great achievement, some great accomplishment. I mean, the fact that we're having
Right.
intellectual conversations so that what? So we could shove shit in one end and shit it out the other and make more tubes.
So we can have some fun along the way.
Yeah, like so, and so that's why that for me that has been for me personally, it's been a significant contribution to my life to have these experiences of expanded consciousness where the substance and significance of the self of existence of the world became so much more than the physical apparatuses we perceive, you know, whether it's a planet or a donkey or an elephant or a human, doesn't matter. You know, when you have that expansion of consciousness, you see the intelligence and the life and the mind and the consciousness that's present in everything, from every blade of grass to, of course, every human being. And then those morals, those ethics, those virtues, they do become extraordinarily significant because you have a more substantive view of the nature of life than you had before. And that's why I theorize that religion was born out of these experiences. You know, a bunch of people drop a bunch of mushrooms, they have this experience, they go, whoa, 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 shit's important. You know, this stuff's important, it's significant, what we're doing here is meaningful, you know. And so they
So is
create
that why
rituals.
is
And
that why morals and virtues and things are important to you?
what do you mean why they're important
So
to me? What's
you
what's
said
the I'm saying that's what has you see it. Now, I'm not saying that's why they are. I'm saying if
no,
you
you were
don't
saying that
see
once
that,
you get those experiences, it
right, you
becomes
can then
more
see it.
or
No, 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 no,
you
no,
can
no.
see
No,
that it's
you can
important.
see it. You can see that it's important. Because if
Right.
you, again,
But
if we
why
go
is it
back,
important?
why is it important? Because
Yeah.
of the substantive nature of life. Because there is more to the individual than being a meat machine that shoves shit in one end, shits it out the other, and makes more tubes, right? It is more significant than that. There is a lot more to the individual, to life, to society, to culture, to family. Like there are these
Yeah.
energetic bodies in this dance, creating this beautiful, harmonious thing we call the universe, right? The one song that all of this play together. And so that's what, for me, that's what can have you see the importance of virtues and principles and morals and ethics. It's not what makes, because you could have this eye-opening, consciousness expanding experience and these realizations about the universe and still choose to be a completely destructive asshole. You know what I mean? Like, you're not necessarily going to, but
That's what I
I
was
would,
getting at. Because for
yeah,
me, I got to those level what I observed, what I learned from a lot of these states
right.
is my role in the dance, my role in the song, the orchestra. I'm like, oh, I'm contributing these aspects of myself here and here and here and here and here and here and here. I don't want to be contributing these things. So
Mhm.
it's like all of a sudden I'm noticing what it is that I inspire and perpetuate in the world. And it becomes important to me to do that intentionally instead
Right.
of just being like, man, fuck it. Like to me, that's where the importance comes from
Mhm.
is the understanding of that role. Otherwise, yeah, like if really anything that I did didn't affect anything, if this was really just a simulation and it's all inside my head, I'm like, why not go rob a bank? Why not hold somebody at gunpoint? Why not like act as if this is Grand Theft Auto?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, I think a lot more than we would like to admit, that's the state that a lot of people are in. Is that there is no purpose or meaning in life for them, and there is no more substantive side to life than their physical experience, right? So that's why you see so many people pursuing, you know, immediate gratification, right? And this is this is telling of where we are as a culture, psychologically speaking, as a society, right? That we have lost, I would say, as a species, or we are losing as a species, a connection to the more substantive sides of ourselves, to the more substantive aspects of the universe itself. That
So let me ask you this.
Let's go away.
Go ahead and finish your thought if you want. Okay.
No, it's gone. You erased it.
So children,
Uh-huh.
they almost always inherently have like this balance between left and right brain, or physical, non-physical. You have kids remembering past lives and things that,
Right.
from being born up until whatever, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. I don't know. But there's a certain point where that becomes kind of switched off. Like it atrophies or something at some point.
Yeah, well,
And for me, I've looked at this as a left brain, right brain thing where we've put so much emphasis on
you want to make everything right brain, left brain, Gingy.
Not everything.
Everything. You want to make everything left brain, right brain.
So follow me here.
No,
if
I can't.
As
soon as you said left brain, right brain, you lost me. I'm like, no, it has nothing to do with
cancel, delete. If we focus so much on linear thought and individuality and that whole direction of consciousness, what happens to the unification and the psychic and the other things that I see disappearing as a child grows older? To me, it's not as if we're losing it as a people. It's that we're focusing in one direction as opposed to both. What do you think?
Well, that's part of the domestication of children into becoming what we are. We domesticate children to reflect what currently is the acceptable model of a human being. And so, of course, children who are engaged in their imagination and, start speaking from the place of, experiences outside the physical, whether it be about, oh, my, the big blue dinosaur. And then mom's like, there are no big blue dinosaurs, Joey. And so you're domesticating the child to let go of all of that other side of themselves, right? That the perception beyond the physical world. I mean, not necessarily physically, but you're beating it out of them through the process of domestication, right? So look at public schools. You could say it's the fault of public schools, but even a person who's going to homeschool their children, they're still going to domesticate those children to be a reflection of them, which could be in many cases even more detrimental than public school. Because you don't know what kind of crazy people are raising that kid. They may be off their rocker and have a very skewed view, whereas at least in public school, they're going to be around, 30, 40 other kids. There's many teachers they're going to have many experiences with over many years. So there's a lot more for them to use as stimulus in the forming of themselves, who they are and their way of thinking, right? Whereas if you limit them to mom and dad and everything comes from mom and dad for 18 years, can you imagine how messed up that person might be?
Dude, I've met kids like that. Homeschool kids are the weirdest.
They can be. Now,
that's all they ever get.
Yeah.
I've seen some like 16, 17-year-old kids like that. And I was just like, where have you been? They're like, what's rap music? I'm like, shit.
Yeah. So it's a domestication process. So, but realistically, we can't even pretend to change that until we start changing the adults in the equation, because you're not going to raise a child outside of that. You're not going to raise a child outside of what society accepts. Yeah, no.
Even if you tried, my dad says monkey see, monkey do.
Right. Yeah. And if you've been around enough kids, you know that kids come in with their own baggage, right? That they enter this world with their own baggage. I mean, I've seen kids that are just evil, like literally evil. And you're like, what? Like, how? How are you're 6 years old and you're evil? like that it boggles the mind. Yeah, like just doing no, dude. I mean, worse than that. Like I've seen some, not a lot, but I've seen it. I've seen serious dimension, within a child, a young child, and it's like yeah, your mom's not that great, but she's not that bad. Like you're worse than her. You're worse than anyone around you. Like this kid is kind of just taken off in his own direction. So there is already within us, and you have to grant that not everything is a result of what you tell a child. Like we can blame public school all we want for the ills of society, and I'd say it's definitely a huge contributing factor. However, I went to public school, and I don't see myself as a victim of it, but I also took my education upon myself at a young age. Like I never depended on a teacher for my education. And to this day, and for me, education is a lifelong thing. So I will constantly be searching and seeking and learning and reading. And so it's not anything I ever plan on stopping. So for someone who's never taken responsibility for their own education to then turn around and blame public school for their ignorance, to me it's just another form of victimization or victimhood, making yourself the victim to something because you choose not to take responsibility for it. So even the child who may grow up in a family void of virtues and principles and things like that, they still have it within them to know these things and to choose to live their lives differently. And in fact, a lot of times they do. A lot of times because they've grown up in a family void of principles or ethics or morals or whatever, they're like, yeah, I do not want to be like these people. like they're clear on that. And so they are very intentional and deliberate to embrace another way of being in the world. So it's I wouldn't say that there's like a process in place that is, well, actually, I can't say that. I would say what I was going to say is that there's not a process in place that's dehumanizing our children, but there kind of is. But it's a combination of things. It's a combination of things. There's when you take into account all things, and this is not, in no way am I taking away the power and responsibility of each child and each person on this planet, that we each do have a responsibility and a power within ourselves to overcome any of these obstacles. However, there is a tremendous amount of energy coming out in the form of media and education and things like that that can be extraordinarily detrimental and dehumanizing.
Yeah.
And I think
I just wonder what it would look like if we normalized and encouraged and even supported psychic experiences, religious experiences.
Again, like you have to you have to do this at the cultural level. Let's say Gingy, you're one of those crazy people, and you're going to do this with your kid, right? And so you do this with your kid, and your kid becomes extraordinarily gifted, and psychic, and can feel what other people are feeling, like really, and knows what other people are thinking, right?
Put them in a public school.
Exactly. You put this kid out in the public, and he's freaking everyone out. Like everyone thinks he's absolutely bananas, right? They think, oh, this kid is crazy. Because even if he knows what he knows about another, they aren't necessarily willing to admit to themselves. So they won't necessarily see this great psychic power within this child. They'll see like, dude, you're a Looney Tune. You're bananas. Your dad's Gingy, huh? Yeah, he's a crackpot. So and that's what you'd be setting them up for, because there is no acceptance of that or acknowledgement of it. Worst case scenario, they end up with a reality show telling fortunes to people. or with a psychic hotline. That's worst case scenario.
Best case, they work for the government.
Oh God, no. Is that best case? Oh my God.
Best case. Yeah, anyway, I see your point. Really, that's at the cultural level.
Yeah.
We couldn't, I mean, unless we fully embodied it as parents
right.
and then taught our kids. But even then, that's a dead end road.
Yeah, and it'd have to be all the kids that are going to be interacting with each other, you know,
Right.
because all it takes is for one kid to, you know, to blow the whole thing.
You hear voices. And
Exactly.
like,
exactly.
Yeah, that's a great point. I've never thought about that. I've always been curious as to what if that was mainstream. Because
Right.
really, like, there's plenty of people that make it all the way into adulthood with these skills intact. For instance, there's a really good friend of mine, Catherine. I haven't talked to her in a while. However, when we used to hang out all the time, she told me that she used to just accidentally slip into this state where she could see the future. And she would know what's going to happen in like 5 minutes from now or a month from now or whatever. And there was one point where she accidentally slipped into an out of body experience. And she was like, whoa, cool, there I am, but here I am. And whoa, she started like exploring and venturing out. And she came back to her body later and swore that she was followed by some like dark shadow figure or entity of some kind. And ever since then, she's had this feeling that if she leaves her body again, that entity will come in and replace her and won't let her back in her own body. And or get her and not let her get back in her body, and she will be forever dead or whatever. And so I'm like, unless really I could see accidentally or even intentionally getting to that level as an adult and having an experience like that, or just because of the amount of fear that circulates on the planet right now, being subject to something like that. I don't know. It seems like it's not at this stage very effective. Now, if you understand how it works and how to operate it,
it depends on your worldview, and it depends on your worldview as well. Like let's go back to the mystical experience, right? The ecstatic experience. Because of the worldview,
like shaman.
Right, well, because of the worldview of, let's say, of Hinduism, right? Where the Brahman is the ultimate reality, what we would equate to God, and yet the Brahman is manifest as everything, right? So, and then it's individualized as the Atman, which we would call like the soul of each individual, but it's all the Brahman. It's the Brahman pretending not to be the Brahman, right? That's the nature of physical reality. And so in that culture, when you have this mystical experience and you actually experience that and you feel it, and you're like, oh my God, I'm the Brahman. And everyone's like, yeah, congratulations, you got it. Like nobody really thinks anything of it, because that's kind of their view of the nature of the universe, is that, yeah, we're all part of that one thing, and that there is no real separation or difference, and that it's all a manifestation of that one thing. However, if your worldview is set in Western religions and you have this mystical experience, you come out and you're like, I'm Jesus Christ, and everyone all of a sudden is like, no, you're a blasphemer. like all of a sudden you've turned everyone in your Christian community against you, because they don't believe you're Jesus Christ. And because of your worldview, you don't believe they're Jesus Christ, right? So you think you're Jesus Christ, like you're the one. Like, I'm here to save y'all, right? And everyone else like, no, you're insane, right? And so there is no that mystical experience has had that effect on people many times. And in Western culture, because they have no other way of thinking about it, that experience of being one and knowing all at that moment, like your immediate go-to is, well, I must be Jesus Christ. And in India, you'd have no problem with that. You go to India, or at least in the Hindu traditions of India, and you say that you're Jesus Christ or Shiva or or Vishnu or anything else, and they're like, oh, okay, cool. That of course you are. Like nobody thinks anything of it. But you walk into a Catholic church and say, I'm Jesus Christ, and you're not going to be the most popular guy in the pulpit that day. So the worldview definitely has an effect on how we process the experience, and I feel that's
our
why
relationship with
and I
our
think
entire
that's an
relationship
important
with
and I think that's
Right.
an important aspect to look at, like our openness to non-dogmatic spirituality. And what I mean by that, and this is I'm going to refine that. I don't like it as a phrase, but it's going to serve the purpose for right now, but I will refine it into some other phrase or some other word or something. But non-dogmatic spirituality means, for me, having a connection to a realization of the more substantive nature of ourselves, the spiritual nature of ourselves and life and the universe, having purpose and meaning within ourselves, but not being caught up in the dogmatic aspects of any particular religion. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't be a willing participant within a religion and still have this non-dogmatic kind of spiritual view of reality. Like you can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you can be a whatever. You can be any religion that has its dogmas. But if you look through the lens of this non-dogmatic spirituality, you can also recognize the wisdom and the beauty within all religions. And so then when you have these consciousness expanding experiences, you can better integrate them into your life, and they can become much more meaningful and much more healing. Because right now, especially in our culture, we don't look at psychedelics within, and when I say our culture, Western culture, they don't look at psychedelics as something that creates a profound state of consciousness, or that has the participant experiencing some profound substantive nature of reality that we usually don't have a connection to, or that we don't usually get to perceive. They look at it as some working of chemicals in the brain. It's just, chemical reactions and stuff, and so it is denigrated. It is like, that is not an important experience. That is not a significant experience. Yet a shaman, would tell you, oh, no. That is the most important experience. That is the most significant experiences, are these mystical experiences. And the fact that within our culture, because let's say there would be a shamanic culture that does embrace or value that, well, we would say, yeah, and they don't have running toilets, as if because we've developed nuclear bombs and toilets, and that we're somehow more consciously aware of the nature of reality than these Amazonian shaman, right? And I don't think that that's necessarily the case. Like, yeah, okay, we've pushed physical sciences to some pretty amazing places, and we've created some pretty amazing things, but no aspect of this science really tells us shit about the true nature of reality. It doesn't tell us, or consciousness. Like, the fundamental questions of the nature of reality and consciousness cannot be touched by all the science that we have. And so I think that that's a great mistake to poo-poo on the ideas of people because they don't have toilets and nuclear weapons. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of just something I'm putting forth as like a way for us to, like, because I do feel like religion is beneficial for people, and I don't, especially because it's cultural. It can pull people together within a culture. So like in this country, there's a vast majority of the people who are religious are Christian. And there's certain principles that Christianity is based on. And that I believe that if these people really lived their lives by these principles and really believed in these principles and were able to create cohesive communities through these principles, which you can see in smaller towns. Go to a place like Portland and they're, that ain't a spiritual mecca. They're woke as fuck, but there's no spirituality there. In my assessment of what spirituality is in meaningful and purposeful life. But like in a smaller town where, it's pretty much culturally homogenous, you have people kind of coming together because they live their lives out of these principles. There is no obligation to be close to, connected to, or compassionate for, or forgiving of your neighbors. It's just something you do, because of that culture, that is preserved there. And so there are pockets of this all over the world. In the Western world, the highly technological world, I feel we're losing touch with, and we're seeing it in the effects that it's having on the social fabric of our society, of our communities, of our culture. And it's interesting because when I thought about, okay, I want to do this show on that mystical experience based in psychedelics and transcendental meditation and other, I was clear that because when I think of a subject that I want to have a discussion with you on, I'm always looking like, okay, yeah, but I don't want to just talk about it, right? Like I could tell you about my experience. I could tell you about the time I fell out of my body, or I could tell you about the experience when I was experiencing through 7 people simultaneously, seeing through everyone's eyes, hearing through everyone's ears, feeling what everyone else was feeling. But that's not, to me, that's not the substantial part of this conversation. The substantial part of this conversation is that aspect of the expansion of consciousness that occurs and how that can allow people to really see the importance and significance of the principles and the morals and the ethics and the virtues that are valued by all religions. Like, I mean, I don't know if there's any religions like, yeah, you shouldn't forgive other people. Yeah, you shouldn't be compassionate. Like, I don't know that religion.
Dude,
I haven't seen that
even
religion.
satanic religions are all about compassion.
Are they really? Well, there you go. So even Satanism, they get it, right? So at some level, so that's why I brought up that concept, which I will refine into a better phrase, but that non-dogmatic spirituality, which then we can look at religion as nothing more significant or nothing that needs to differentiate or separate people, because it's as inconsequential as like the color of your car, you know what I mean, or the neighborhood you live in. Like, your choice of religion shouldn't put you at odds with people who choose a different religion if you can elevate to that non-dogmatic spirituality, almost like a uniform. We'll call it the URC, the Uniform Religious Code, where it's like, all right, yeah, y'all got your own dogmas, y'all got your own beliefs, but here's a universal religious code that we've gone through all of them. We notice y'all like these morals, y'all like these ethics and these virtues. They're good everywhere. So if we can all agree upon that, we can all have our own religions, and you can all do your own rituals, and you can all do your own thing, as long as we recognize and acknowledge and live our lives through these principles, and we value these principles. And so there needs to be a reconnection to that more substantial side of ourselves, that spiritual side of ourselves, because without it, when people see the world or human beings as meat machines that feed in one end and waste out the other and duplicate or reproduce more meat machines, like, there is no place for morals and ethics in that, because the universe is just a machine, and people are just machines.
Unless those morals and ethics can be used to your advantage sociopathically,
Oh yeah,
to
no,
just
that's being
manipulate
done.
and get what you want.
Oh yeah, that's being done. Like your reproductive rights. Oh, it's your reproductive rights, dude. You're murdering children. Like in reality, like you could give it all the moral elements you want. The reality is you're killing a child. And whether you believe you should be able to or shouldn't be able to, whatever, that is telling of where we are as a society, where the moral side of the conversation is it's a right, right? There are people who stand in a morally superior place that because I feel that this person should have this right, that it's okay to kill a child, and
Or kill in general. Like really, if you went back to the morals
even
and
war.
principles, like
Yeah.
what do you think about killing?
Yeah, well, war.
That's the thing that I always had a
War is justified through morals and ethics, right? So it is a, I'd say that's why elevating, again, it is a thing of consciousness, because there's no way you can have an experience of expanding your consciousness beyond the mind of the self and see a bigger picture and experience the oneness or the unity or the relevance and substantiveness of each individual and every plant and animal and everything else. You can't be in that experience and then morally, or I should say, use your morals and ethics for means of manipulation, which is what's being done primarily in our society. If there is ever a conversation on morals or ethics, it's typically some form of manipulation to justify some immoral act.
Well, something that you pointed out earlier in this call was that it's not just the one experience that I'm enlightened and now I can go into. No, it doesn't work like that. It's
Right.
the repeated experiences.
Right.
It's having one deep meditation and then all of a sudden that makes sense of a mushroom trip you had when you were a teenager, and that
Right.
makes sense out of this out of body experience that happened. The accumulation of all of these experiences clicks something.
Right.
And they all sort, it's
Absolutely.
like a chiropractic session where you go in there and it pops your back and he's like, well, your upper back is not going to align. I need to do some massaging, and they loosen up muscles and kind of like make it malleable again, and then pop. Okay, cool. Then we got it. And sometimes you got to go back over and over and over to continue to get your whole spine in alignment. It's the
Right.
same way with this. One session ain't going to do it.
No,
it's got to
and
be
that's
something that
and that's
reinforces with it.
and that's why it's seen as a medicine by the shamanic cultures. It's definitely not a cure-all. It's not like, oh, you've done it once, you're done, you're good to go, you're now an enlightened being. The reality is it is a medicine. It's
a window, like you get to look
works,
inside what's really going on.
Exactly, and it works best when you use it that way, when you're like intentional that in whether it's you're going to do transcendental meditation or whether you're going to drop some mushrooms, you're intentional about the work you are going to do on yourself to open yourself up, to remove your own barriers, right? To allow yourself to forgive, right? So to be intentional with it and to see it as like a medicine that can be integrated into your life and it's really just a tool to support you in aligning the things in your life, right? You could do it without it, right? But it's such a Kickstarter. It's like meditation, right?
Well, for me, it's like the aspects of seeing everything as one and understanding not the different pieces of the world, but the relationships between the world. You can't look at everything individualistically after you've got an experience of that, like everything being different aspects.
Now that's the thing, because, and this is why I have such a hard time with the woo-woo talk about we're all one, man. It's all one. It's all one thing.
I guess I should qualify that, because I'm really not trying to.
You did. No. You spoke into it with the experience of it, because that's the best way you can articulate it, is because in correct me if I'm wrong, that is a completely inadequate explanation for the experience.
Which part?
I had an experience of oneness. Does that really encompass? Does that really convey that experience? No, not even
really
close.
Doesn't.
So it's like it's the closest thing you can, or the closest articulation you can get to in words to try to put this experience together. But it is so, it can be incredibly life-changing, incredibly opening, and incredibly insightful. And like, because if you say that, imagine this, saying it to someone who's never had the experience, and how kooky it sounds, how corny.
No, I was there. I was always like, yeah, okay, we're all one. We get it. But
Yeah.
in my mind, I was always like, yeah, we're all one, but we're also not. I'm me, you're you. We're all people, but we're different people. Like that's the conundrum of this human experience.
It's
that
again,
yes, you were individuals, but also we're not. We're also the same people. We have more in common than we don't.
Right.
So it's, where do I want to focus on? Do I want to focus on our differences or our similarities?
This is why I have that distinction. This is why I have that distinction on truth and fact, right? Like, there is truth, but you can never speak it, right? So there's the truth of that experience you had. But when you talk about that experience, that is not the truth, because it cannot convey that experience, right?
That's why every experience is unique.
You could state facts, right? You could state facts. You could say, well, I ate the mushrooms at this time, and at this time they really started to hit, and at this time, like you could speak into it, and you can make factual deductions about the experience, but you can't convey the experience. And that, for me, is what truth is the experience that you're having. As soon as you try to articulate it, whether it's through speech, through writing, any symbol, right? Which speech and writing are symbols. They're symbolic. They're trying to convey a concept, an idea.
An experience.
But they're wholly inadequate, especially for that experience that you're talking about, that oneness. We're all one, man. I'm one with the plants. Oh my God, me and the tree, we're like this, man. It's got a battery dying over here. So yeah, it's wholly inadequate to actually conveying the experience. So yes,
I wish we had this conversation at the very beginning, because it goes to the heart of this. Saying we're all one is complete woo-woo, like misleading nonsense. And I've gotten to a place where I understand it completely different than the woo-woo concepts, just like ego. Everyone's like, oh man, kill the ego. Ego sucks. Ego's bad. No, it's all you fucking know is ego. You don't know anything outside of that in the level of conscious focus that an individual is at right now.
Right.
Like outside ego, there is no linear thought. There is no linear anything.
There is no individual. There is no individual self.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's why I'm like, okay, I'm done with my rant.
Well, that may be. You see that? You see the light?
Yep.
I have a light dying over here. One of my studio lights is dying. I forgot to plug it in. It's running on a battery. So and that, I think, that the individual experience, in so much as, because you do have that outside of the individual experience, right? It is beyond the individual mind. That's why it's so expansive, and why it's so profound, is that you have an experience of mind that ain't your own, and that individuality, that individual aspect. Because we touched on this a little bit in Beyond the Matrix, right? Where it's like, yes, you can get to that state right? You can get to this state of being beyond the matrix, but you're wholly dysfunctional there. like you can't operate in the physical world there, right? And that's the same thing here. And that's why and this, I guess, kind of speaks into the duality you brought up at the beginning of they're having that experience of outside the self, beyond the self, of a higher mind, if you will, of a greater consciousness. You can't operate there. you can't live a day-to-day life. You can't, work at a job and have kids and raise a family like that. You can't do that
Can't
in
pay
that
your
space.
bills.
Yeah, you're definitely going to. Well, I heard bills are a fundamental human right. Or no, what was it?
Human rights violation.
Human rights violation. That's right. Bills are a human rights violation. I love that. I love that idea. It's just so profoundly idiotic. But my choices are, I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. However, so there is that power in being able to enter these states, to have these experiences, and then, because we said that's in that place, you can do work on yourself that is much more difficult to do in the focused consciousness, right? In the individual consciousness, in that state that we hover in 99.9% of the time. You could do work on yourself and you could become aware of things and you could become enlightened to things, and it all works. You don't need it. However, it's tremendously powerful to have that experience outside of the self, that can profoundly impact the life within the individual self and impact it in a positive, beneficial, and healing way.
I just had the realization as you were saying, yes, you can go into the perspective, I'm going to call it, of we're all one, and you can live there. It's just not effective. It's not productive. Right. You're wholly dysfunctional in that state. As far as what it takes to live on this planet day to day in physical reality. And it just clicked in my mind thinking, what's happening in all of the politics and stuff that we've been talking about for the last however many calls we've done, at least it's come up once every call, is that us identifying people as a group is a way of saying, look, all these people are one. And it in itself is not, and it's dysfunctional. It's not a way to effectively operate on this planet because we're also individuals. So while, yes, it's good to understand we have way more in common than what we don't. We're all one people. We're all one population. We're all on one planet. But we're also individuals. And if we're focusing on being individuals, we have a much more potent effectiveness and power to operate and partner with each other and operate as one.
Yeah.
Like you couldn't take a basketball team and say, all right, guys, you're all one, so move as one. No, they each have their role, their position, their own logic and thought process, and everything that comes into being an effective partner.
Right.
Being an effective teammate.
And that's why I pointed at these philosophies as insidious and toxic, is because they say outright that there's no importance or significance in the individual. There is only the group. There's only the group identity. The group identity is all that matters and all that counts. And that's why there's no importance on an individual's rights.
Well, it's the same the other way too. You have to blend the two together. You can't have all collective or all individual because they're both dysfunctional. They're both inoperable.
No, but like you said, you have to start with the individual. Like if you don't recognize an individual, you will never have a functioning society. That to not recognize an individual and to only treat individuals by a group identity, or to only recognize them as a group identity, or to only give them rights as a based on a group identity is incredibly toxic towards the creation of a meaningful and cohesive community, because the community, and so I'm not saying that, yes, individual rights trump the needs of a community. No, they, like you said, they do go hand in hand. That your rights are also the rights of others, right? And unless you recognize that, and that every individual holds those same rights, then you don't have a cohesive community, right? So they do go hand in hand, but to eliminate the individual, then you don't have recognizing the inherent value of the individual, and that, I feel like, if we're already there, I feel that there's already an aspect of our community that already devalues the individual to quite a degree, especially of men, right? We've been in the business of dehumanizing men for centuries. So the dehumanization, the devaluation of men, or of human beings, or of the individual, makes atrocities really easy. It makes the elimination of entire populations really easy, because you no longer recognize the individual. And if all you recognize is a group, then all you have to do is demonize the group, and then the masses, the mob, has no problem doing away with that group, because we don't see them as individuals, right? We see them as a collective, that, like, oh, they're all bad. They do this and that. They speak this language. They practice this religion. Well, they're bad, and we must get rid of them.
Separate somehow from us.
Yeah, exactly. Not part of our group. They're not part of our groups. All right.
Yeah.
I feel like okay, let me check my list here, because I didn't. Yep, I feel like we hit everything. We didn't go deep into the guided experience, but we touched on it. And I think we brought it around to where I wanted to bring it around to, which was, how can these mystical experiences, either induced by transcendental meditation, psychedelics, religious rituals, whatever, however you come about these experiences, I believe that they're incredibly important right now, because in my assessment, there's a spiritual crisis in our society, in our culture. And in order to overcome the spiritual crisis, I feel that people need to get in touch with the spiritual aspects of themselves, the spiritual nature of life, the spiritual nature of the universe, so that we can start living from a place of virtues and morals and ethics and principles, which I believe, if we really sat down and war gamed it out, we would all be in alignment with very much the same principles and morals and ethics and things like that.
Totally agree. And it's extremely important to identify the connection between, like, all of this awesome stuff that can come from not only religious experiences, but also psychedelics and shamanism, spiritual experiences, dreams, random expansions of consciousness, like a near-death experience. It's important because oftentimes, especially in the US, we demonize, right now it's illegal to eat mushrooms, to buy mushrooms, to grow mushrooms, at least the psilocybin version, or peyote or anything else, unless, like, there's a church in Florida, I think. I just watched there's a documentary called, like, the wellness industry or healing or something like that on Netflix. And there's a group in Florida that they do, I want to say, ayahuasca ceremonies. And they give everybody tea and they drink it, and they're able to do it because it's protected under, like, a religious act of some sort. Where, as long as they're a church and practicing the thing, they can all get together and do ayahuasca. And they keep getting attacked by saying, like, well, so and so under your care fell down the stairs and died, and so what you're doing is bad, and what you're giving people is bad. And they went in and interviewed the guys, and they were like, Yeah, he did a session, and we tried to get him to stay, but it had been several hours, and we're not a prison. We had to let the guy leave on his own accord. A couple days later, he tripped and fell down the stairs, not intoxicated under ayahuasca or anything at all. And so it's like there is this attempt to sort of keep individual psychic type of experiences
Mhm.
out of the masses,
Oh
which is
yeah.
important to understand. We've made it legal because every single experience, psychically, religiously, or otherwise, is completely individualized to the individual person. There is no exact same shared experience. Now, there can be, like you talked about, you were experiencing through other people, but
But
regardless, or
they weren't necessarily experiencing me experiencing through them.
exactly.
Yeah. So it's
So
not in
you
that
had your
sense,
own
it's not a shame.
experience from your own right. So you had
Right.
your own experience from your own perspective,
Now,
and
and
they
that's
had
not to
their
say,
experiences.
but that's not to say that people don't have shared experiences, because they do. I've had shared experiences with people where two of us had the exact same experience of going to the exact same place, seeing the exact same things. And I mean, and that was actually one of the most profound experiences I had in my life. And it was nothing, no meditation, no psychedelics. Like, we were just having a conversation, and it was as if we dropped into a wormhole or something, and we were somewhere else, and I mean, it was one of those consciousness expanding moments where it was there, it was like being on a psychedelic or like having a near death experience, where all of a sudden there was this expansion of awareness and consciousness. And so we had that feeling. And the same thing with the time warping that you experience oftentimes
Yeah,
in these states. It was all that was there, all that was present, except there was nothing to stimulate it. There was nothing to set it off. There was no substance that we took in order to get there, except for having a conversation,
but now,
sitting across from each other.
Did you really have the same experience, or did you
Yeah.
experience the same thing?
Well, yeah, we didn't have the same experience because we were each having our own experience, but
And that's
we
the point I wanted to draw out.
we had the same account of the experience. Like, oh my
Right.
God, like, because while it was happening, we weren't talking about it. You know what I mean? It was like
Mhm.
it was interesting because it was like you dropped into the state. And like I said, it's like it's timeless, right? It's this timeless moment. And and what and I'm we weren't talking. I'm pretty sure we had stopped talking. 'Cause I don't remember saying anything in that experience, and I don't remember her saying anything in that experience. But we dropped into this experience, and we were in a room of people, a room full of people. They were all gone. Everyone in the room was gone. Like, it was just white light surrounding us. Um, and just, the timelessness of it. And there was, I would say, the equivalent of years of experience happening, in that it was like getting a download of so much about this person who was sitting across from me, like, just like taking it all in, and something that, if you were to sit down and try to tell me everything I was getting in that moment, it would have taken you months or years to tell me all this. You know what I mean? And it's just hitting me, right? And at the same time, just everything and how it was happening around us. And then woo, we're back in the room. Everyone else is there. And we're both like, did that just happen? Did you see that? Because we had to confirm with each other, like, wait, was that just me? Like, did I just have an aneurysm? Like, what happened? But we both, and because we were both in that state of disbelief that it had just occurred. Like, wait a minute, that doesn't happen. You don't just
Yeah.
drop out of reality with someone and then come
That's
back.
actually the first time I've heard that happening with anybody. I've never heard that repeated anywhere. I'm
Oh,
sure it
really?
happens, but
Oh, I'm sure it
yeah.
does. I'm sure it does.
Like I've had many little versions of it, but
Right.
not like you've explained. But
Yeah.
it's important for me to bring up this point that every individual is having their own experience. Just like you can go to a movie, watch the same movie, sit next to each other, still individual experiences. You can
Right.
both hold each other's hands and jump out of an airplane at the same time, have two totally different experiences. It's the same way with psychic or religious or any of these other experiences.
Mhm.
You could be both take mushrooms and you sit next to each other and you have a great time. You're gonna have two totally different experiences, and
Yeah,
that's
but
important.
actually, I did have an experience on LSD of psychokinesis. Have you ever had that? Or telekinesis? What's the difference? Telekinesis is right. Psychokinesis is you moving shit. Is that
Yes, PK.
okay?
Yeah.
What's the when you talk in each other's heads?
I think that's
Telekinesis, right?
telecommunication. Yeah.
Okay. So, but that's not how it works. So just so you know, so we had this experience and we both had it because we talked about it later when we could articulate again. Um, but okay, again, words can never articulate an experience, right? And this experience is so beyond words, but I'm going to try my best. Okay. So it's not like I send words over to your head and you get them in your head and you send words over to my head and I get them in my, that's not how
Or
it
I'm
works.
I'm thinking in your brain. That's not how it
Right. That's not how it works. It was, and again, this isn't a, I'm not giving you a physical representation. This is a metaphor of what was
Okay.
occurring. Okay. Imagine a whirlpool, right? Like a vortex. Okay. And you're sharing this vortex. You're both, it's like connecting the two of you, right? And you can toss out entire ideas, entire concepts, fully formed concepts into the vortex. It just kind of goes into the vortex and you can pick them up out of the vortex as they come by. So you're both tossing things in and you're both seeing what the other's tossing in. Does that convey kind of what it's like? It's like I
Not
said,
for
it's not
me. My
words.
experience has been different, but
Yeah, it's not like words. It's not like it's not like words at all. There were no words to this. Now I may have used words in my mind to uh, to articulate the
formulate it.
concept that came out of the whirlpool, but it's not like it's not his words. He threw
Right.
the entire idea in there. He threw the entire concept in there. I picked it up and gave my own words to it.
Now, was there actually like a feeling of putting down and picking up?
It again, I don't want you to take that's the metaphor, okay?
Okay.
So no, it's not like we were both sitting in front of a whirlpool throwing things in. That's not how it was working.
So that's the part that catches me up.
Yeah, that's the
That's the
metaphor.
part that
Of it.
catches me up because in the okay,
So,
so
and the
Hermetics
reason
describes this.
the reason I used the whirlpool, it was because as soon as he
Okay.
put something in, it was there until I grabbed it. You know what I mean? Until I engaged it, right? So it was like he's throwing all this shit in, I'm throwing all this shit in, and then it's like as soon as you engage it, it's like okay, you've taken it out of the whirlpool. You know what I mean? Like boom, you
Yeah.
engage it, it's out of the whirlpool. So it's like but again, it wasn't physical in any way. I'm like, this is my best
But
attempt to articulate it in metaphor that I can. So that was
it's
my
really
experience of
interesting.
telekinesis.
It's really interesting that you could like remove it from the space or
Yeah.
engage with it and it disappeared
Engage
from
it.
the
Yeah, I
space.
don't know if remove is the right word. And I don't know if disappear is the right word. But once you engaged it, it no longer distorted what else was in the space. You know what I mean? It
Okay.
was like, okay, I've engaged that. So it's not there anymore. But again, you got to remember this is metaphor. There wasn't an actual space where ideas were floating around in a whirlpool. That was the experience that pop, 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 throw all this stuff out there, and it's there until you engage it, and you engage it, and you engage it, and each piece that you engage, it's like you're narrowing the field to the point where it's like,
Could you
okay, we've
ignore
engaged.
pieces of it? Could you ignore pieces of it?
No, well, you wouldn't know if you did. You know what I mean? Like
Well,
he
if
may
you
have
saw it coming and you're like, no.
No. See, you're getting caught up in the metaphor. You're making the metaphor
Okay,
into
okay.
the physical reality. There was no whirlpool, Gingy. There were no idea balls floating in that whirlpool. This is all metaphor. It was something was in the space. God, see, and because I'm trying to use these concepts of space and things like that, so it draws a picture of there being physical space, but there wasn't. It was just engagement, you know. but what I was engaging with was what he put into the space, and what he engaged with was what I put into the space. But you're still
Right.
fully aware of what you put in. So like that's why I'm saying it's like a whirlpool, because you know it's there. You know what I mean? Like it's, and again, not that you're physically seeing it, but it's this consciousness that you're sharing at that moment, and you know what's there. You know what you put in. You know what you know what he put in the sense that if and if you engage with it, then it's there. You know what I mean? Like, and again, it was many hours before we were actually able to articulate that experience, but it was the same experience, or the but what was the wording you used before? As opposed to same experience, it was uh, experiencing the same phenomena. You know, we weren't having the exact same experience
Oh,
because
you weren't having the same experience, but
yeah,
you were
I was
experiencing
putting
the
in
same.
my ideas. Yeah, I was putting in my ideas, getting his ideas. He was putting in his ideas, getting my ideas. So, and that's why I'm saying ideas too, because it wasn't like words. It wasn't like you throw in a sentence and then he picks up the sentence from the beginning to the end. You know what I mean? It wasn't word based at all. It was conceptual. It was like a fully formed idea or concept that
So
you project and then they engage. Yeah, it's an
hermetics
interesting. It was very interesting
or
phenomenon.
hermeticism,
Uh-huh.
they have a word for this, and they call it lingua verde, which literally translates to the green
Green
tongue
word.
or green
Oh,
tongue,
well, green word, green
green
language,
tongue.
green tongue. Yes.
And they call it like the language of nature. And people that I've had teach me how to communicate with animals or plants, it works in the same way as
Mhm.
this telekinesis. But for me, it's less of like a shared conversation. Like this, the conversation or the relationship or whatever is not really shared. It's more like whatever someone's trying to communicate, I can feel that they're communicating, and what I get is an impression. And that impression is as vivid as like I just finished reading this book and I know every word that's in it to whatever degree I choose. And if I look at it, I can remember all the details of every sentence of that entire book instantly. So if somebody is like
That's okay. So
telling me about their day, this
that's
is the
what I'm calling these concepts that we threw in
idea
there.
balls.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
idea balls, because it was that's what it was. It was fully formed in and of itself. In that
But
it
it's not like a concept though, or an
no,
idea.
I that again,
It's like
that's me.
full experience.
Gingy, don't get caught up in me trying to articulate this. What you just explained with the book is a better explanation of it, because
Okay.
it's like you've digested the entire book. So yes, a book isn't one idea or one concept, right?
Mhm.
Right. So that's what this was. Again, this isn't something I can relate to in real life. I don't have this
Okay.
experience every day. I don't, so it's hard to articulate with whirlpools and concept and idea balls and whatever else, you know. And so it's my best attempt, but like what you just described with the book and what you called an impression. See, as soon as you said the word impression, though, I'm all, no, it's much more substantial than that, because of my definition of impression. I'm like, no, 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 it's not an impression. It goes way beyond impression. But then when you used the description of the book, and like I've read this whole book, and I know the narratives and the stories and the relationships between the characters, that's what it was. Okay.
Yeah.
That's what you got. You were able
All
to
the
throw these
aspects.
out. Yeah, you were able to throw these out. Like it was a ball. Like, boom, here, take that, lifetime. You know what I mean? Like, just
Right.
boop, you know, or yeah, I mean, like it would be like, oh, you've never seen that movie? Here you go. Here's the entire movie, the entire understanding of it, all the interaction between the characters, you know. Just boop,
It would be
drop
as
it
if
in.
downloads were instant. You go
Yes,
online and be like, "What's that book like?" Click.
boom,
Oh, nice.
got it
Got
exactly.
it. Whole
Like
thing.
the Matrix. Yeah, like the Matrix,
With
but faster.
no, yeah, and with no forgetfulness or cloudedness. Is like with such immense clarity of every detail.
Yeah,
Like I tell people it's like I knew I could know in that instant, like if I looked at a book, what the story was, who the characters were, what information got left out, where the pages were made, what trees were cut down and when by who to make the paper and who bound the books. Like that level of detail, it
Right.
all exists in what I'm calling an impression, which is really just this ball of sensation, which could be mental or
Okay,
emotional.
I think really at this
Too
point
much.
we're proving our
Feeding it.
point.
We're just trying to.
We're proving
We're
our
just
point
trying
that
to.
you cannot articulate these experiences in any kind of meaningful way. So yeah,
Everybody
and
else is going to be like,
the hell are
okay,
these
you
two
guys
idiots
have just
talking about?
ran in circles and
Yeah.
none of it made any sense.
No, because you can't articulate it. So it's absolutely essential to have the experience.
Any takeaway is every experience is at the individual level. You can have shared experiences, collective experiences, but it's each has an individual experience level to it. That was the point I was trying to make because that's important. You can't run to somebody else and be like, "What does my dream mean?" It wasn't for them.
Right. Well, not without some context. You know,
They can
I
be like,
mean, you
"Well,
can
ask
have
these
some insight.
questions."
Yeah, you can have some insight on the dream, but you definitely have to create some context around the characters and stuff. So
Like, "Oh, it was spiders." Yeah, you must have some fear inside of you or something. Like,
no,
no, I love
I love
spiders.
spiders.
I got a tarantula at home.
Yeah, they just kick
I
it
don't
around the
even pay
house. I don't even keep them in a tank.
That's the difference. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All righty. I think we did it. I think I hit all the points I wanted to hit. I even hit on the good trip, bad trip through a segue. On the dude who went to hell. So alrighty, Gingy. As always, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. Can't wait to do it again. High five. Good job. Talk to you soon, my friend.
yeah, man. Have a good night.
You too.